In the heart of a sprawling nebula, where colors danced like liquid fire across the void, humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial life unfolded in ways no one could have imagined. The ship Aurora's reach drifted silently through this cosmic tapestry, its crew composed of scientists, diplomats, and explorers chosen for their intellect, adaptability, and courage. Among them was Elias Varn, a linguist whose expertise had been honed not only by years of study but also by an insatiable curiosity about the unknown. He wasn't built like the soldiers or engineers aboard. He carried himself with quiet intensity, his sharp features softened by deep brown eyes that seemed perpetually searching. Elias stood at the observation deck, his fingers tracing the cool glass as he gazed out at the alien world below. It shimmered beneath layers of atmospheric haze, a planet teeming with bioluminescent forests and crystalline oceans that caught the light of twin suns. This mission had consumed him for months, deciphering fragments of communication intercepted from space, piecing together patterns that hinted at intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Now, here they were, hovering above what might be the most significant discovery in history. Sentient beings who had invited them to land. The message had come days ago, transmitted in a series of harmonic tones interspersed with bursts of electromagnetic energy. After relentless analysis, it resolved into something unmistakably deliberate, a greeting, followed by coordinates leading to a structure on the planet's surface. A palace, some whispered among the crew, though none dared confirm it without seeing it firsthand. What awaited them? Would these aliens resemble anything familiar? Or would they defy all preconceived notions of life itself? As the landing party prepared to descend, tension crackled in the air. Each member knew the stakes. Success meant bridging galaxies, forging alliances that could redefine existence itself. Failure. Well, failure didn't bear thinking about. Yet Elias felt something else stirring within him, a strange mix of anticipation and unease. He'd always believed language was the key to understanding others, but now, standing on the precipice of such profound strangeness, he wondered if words alone would suffice. When the shuttle finally touched down, the ground trembled slightly under its weight, sending ripples through the iridescent grass surrounding the landing site. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with something sweet and floral that made Elias's head swim. As the hatch opened, a collective gasp rippled through the team. Before them stretched an expanse of glowing flora, pulsating softly in hues of violet and gold. But it was the figure emerging from the horizon that drew every eye. She moved like liquid starlight, her form shifting between translucent and solid with each step closer. Her body seemed sculpted from living crystal, refracting light into cascading rainbows that danced across her skin. Towering nearly twice the height of any human, she radiated an aura of both majesty and otherworldliness. Her limbs elongated gracefully, tapering into delicate points that glimmered even in shadow. Atop her head rose intricate spires resembling coral, each tip flickering with tiny sparks of energy. Her face, or what passed for one, was smooth and angular, devoid of features save for two vertical slits where eyes might be expected. These slits pulsed faintly, emitting a rhythmic glow that suggested focus or perhaps emotion. But it was her voice that truly shattered the silence. When she spoke, it wasn't merely sound, it was resonance, vibration, and melody woven together in a symphony of meaning. Though none of the humans understood her words, the intent was clear. She commanded attention, demanded acknowledgement. The diplomatic envoy stepped forward hesitantly, raising a hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. She tilted her head, those glowing slits narrowing ever so slightly before widening again, as though assessing him, and finding him wanting. Then, her gaze shifted to Elias. His breath hitched as the radiant queen turned fully toward him, her presence overwhelming yet oddly magnetic. She extended one shimmering arm, palm upturned, and emitted another cascade of harmonics. This time, there was no mistaking the directive in her tone. Without warning, she reached out, her crystalline fingers brushing against his cheek. The touch sent a jolt through him, not painful, but electric, as if her very essence sought to bridge the gap between species. "Don't just stare," came a voice inside his mind, startling him. It wasn't spoken aloud, nor did it echo like her earlier sounds. Instead, it resonated directly within his thoughts, crisp and commanding. "Touch me, human." Elias froze, his pulse thundering in his ears. Every instinct screamed caution, yet the weight of her gaze pinned him in place. Slowly, trembling, He raised his hand, hesitating mere inches from her luminous skin. Her expression, or lack thereof, remained unreadable, but the pulsing rhythm of her islets quickened, urging him onward. When his fingertips finally brushed hers, a surge of warmth spread through his arm, accompanied by a flood of sensations too complex to process. Images flashed unbidden behind his eyelids. Vast cities suspended in orbit, rivers of molten light carving paths across barren moonscapes, and countless faces staring back at him, their forms blurring into abstraction. Around them, the rest of the crew watched in stunned silence, their expressions oscillating between awe and fear. No one dared interrupt, though murmurs of disbelief rippled through the group. Was this some form of telepathy? Or had Elias become a conduit for something far greater than himself? Whatever the case, the connection between man and alien queen deepened with each passing second, binding them together in ways neither could yet comprehend. Elias felt the tendrils of her consciousness weaving delicately around his own, probing gently yet insistently. It wasn't invasive exactly, but it was intimate, an exploration of thought, memory, and emotion unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The sensation was overwhelming, akin to being submerged in warm water while simultaneously floating in the vacuum of space. His knees buckled slightly, and he stumbled backward, breaking the physical contact. The queen's reaction was immediate. Her crystalline form flared brighter, her posture stiffening as though offended by his retreat. Yet the damage, if it could be called that, had already been done. Fragments of her essence lingered within him, whispering echoes of her intentions, desires, and frustrations. He realized then that her command to touch had not been arbitrary. It was a test, a gauntlet thrown down to gauge humanity's willingness to engage on her terms. To her, distance, whether physical or emotional, was an affront. Connection, raw and unfiltered, was paramount. As the realization dawned, Elias locked eyes with the envoy, who stood frozen mid-step, unsure whether to intervene. The tension crackled like static electricity, palpable even amidst the surreal beauty of their surroundings. Behind him, the rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances, their unity fractured by uncertainty. Some clutched their instruments tighter, ready to document or defend. Others recoiled instinctively, their scientific training overridden by primal fear. "You must understand," Elias said haltingly, addressing the queen as much as his companions. We are trying." His voice sounded foreign to his own ears, strained and small against the grandeur of her presence. She tilted her head again, this time more deliberately, as though weighing his sincerity. Then, with a fluid motion, she gestured toward the distant horizon, where towering spires of light pierced the heavens. The implication was clear: follow her, or remain unworthy. The journey to the spires was both mesmerizing and grueling. The terrain beneath their feet shifted unpredictably, transforming from soft, glowing moss to jagged obsidian-like formations without warning. Each step required vigilance, yet no one dared complain, not when the alien queen strode ahead with effortless grace, her radiant form illuminating the path. Elias found himself walking beside her, acutely aware of the invisible tether that bound them. Her energy pulsed intermittently, brushing against his consciousness like a curious breeze, testing boundaries he hadn't known existed. Behind them, the crew struggled to keep pace, their equipment clinking softly as they adjusted sensors and recorded data. The air grew denser, charged with an almost tangible hum that set teeth on edge. Conversation dwindled to terse exchanges, punctuated by nervous laughter or muttered prayers. Yet despite their unease, there was an undeniable magnetism to the queen's presence. Even those who had recoiled earlier now stole glances at her, captivated by the impossible elegance of her movements. When they finally reached the base of the spires, Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. The structures loomed impossibly high, their surfaces alive with swirling patterns of light that seemed to tell stories older than stars. At their center stood a massive archway, its edges shimmering with a prismatic glow. The queen paused before it, turning to face the humans with an expectant stillness. Her voice echoed once more in Elias's mind, softer now but no less commanding. "Step through. Prove yourselves." One by one, the crew hesitated, their resolve wavering under the weight of the unknown. The envoy glanced at Elias, seeking guidance, but the linguist was lost in thought, his mind replaying fragments of what he'd glimpsed during their initial contact. He remembered the faces, The countless beings who had stared back at him, their forms dissolving into abstraction. Were they her people? Memories? Or something else entirely? The questions swirled chaotically, threatening to overwhelm him. Finally, Elias took a tentative step forward, his boots scraping against the crystalline ground. The sound reverberated unnaturally, bouncing off the spires and amplifying until it felt like the entire landscape held its breath. As he approached the archway, the queen extended her arm again, her fingers grazing his shoulder. This time, the touch was different, gentler, almost reassuring. A rush of warmth flooded through him, steadying his nerves. Whatever lay beyond, she wanted him to see it. Needed him to. Taking a deep breath, Elias crossed the threshold. The moment Elias stepped through the archway, reality itself seemed to fracture and reassemble around him. The world beyond was a kaleidoscope of shifting dimensions, where gravity bent and light twisted into impossible shapes. Colors danced wildly, forming patterns that defied logic yet somehow resonated deeply within him. It was as though he stood at the intersection of countless realities, each vying for his attention. Above, the sky churned with storms of golden lightning, while below, the ground rippled like liquid mercury, reflecting distorted versions of himself stretching infinitely outward. He turned to call out to the others, but his voice was swallowed by the cacophony of ambient sounds, chiming tones, deep resonant hums, and whispers in languages he couldn't begin to comprehend. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind as he realized the rest of the crew was nowhere to be seen. Had they followed him? Or had the archway separated them, scattering them across this alien plane? His heart pounded as he scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of familiarity. But all he found was the alien queen, standing calmly amidst the chaos, her crystalline form aglow with an inner light that seemed to anchor her to this surreal landscape. Her presence brought a strange comfort, though it did little to quell the rising tide of confusion. She gestured toward a towering structure in the distance, a cathedral-like edifice forged from translucent material that shimmered like opalescent glass. Its spires spiraled upward into infinity, vanishing into clouds of iridescent mist. As Elias approached, guided by her silent commands, he noticed intricate carvings etched into the walls, each line glowing faintly with the same energy that coursed through her. They weren't mere decorations. They pulsed rhythmically, as though alive, and Elias felt an inexplicable urge to trace them with his fingers. When he finally touched the surface, a surge of information flooded his mind. Images, sensations, emotions, all colliding in a torrent of overwhelming clarity. He saw civilizations rise and fall, planets consumed by fire and reborn from ash, beings of unimaginable forms coexisting in harmony. And woven throughout these visions was a recurring motif. The queen herself, central to it all, her essence intertwined with the fabric of creation. This wasn't just a place, it was a repository of knowledge, a living archive of existence itself. Yet amidst the grandeur, doubt crept in. Why had she brought him here? What did she want from him? The answers eluded him, slipping through his grasp like sand. All he knew was that he couldn't turn back. Not now, not after glimpsing the enormity of what lay before him. As Elias absorbed the deluge of alien memories, fragments began to coalesce into coherent narratives. One vision stood starkly vivid, a council of beings, their forms indistinct yet commanding, gathered around a pulsating orb of pure energy. Their voices resonated not with sound but with intention, each word imbued with the weight of galaxies. They argued fiercely, their debates centered on humanity's burgeoning presence in the cosmos. Some advocated for eradication, viewing humans as reckless children playing with forces they couldn't comprehend. Others, fewer in number, believed in potential, untapped creativity and resilience that could enrich the tapestry of universal life. The Queen emerged as a pivotal figure in these deliberations. Her arguments were impassioned, her crystalline form blazing with conviction as she pleaded for patience and understanding. She spoke of balance, of the delicate interplay between destruction and creation, urging her peers to give humanity a chance to prove their worth. Yet, skepticism lingered heavily in the chamber, and the decision hung precariously in the balance. This revelation struck Elias with the force of a supernova. The Queen had risked much to bring him here, to show him this glimpse of her world's internal strife. It was clear now that her actions were not merely exploratory but deeply political. By choosing him, by insisting he touch her and thus forge a tentative bond, she had placed her faith, and perhaps her future, in his hands. If he failed to convey humanity's value, the consequences would ripple across stars and civilizations, sealing Earth's fate in ways he couldn't fathom. The gravity of her gamble pressed down on Elias, mingling with the awe inspired by her courage. Here was a leader willing to defy her own kind for the sake of an uncertain alliance. As he pondered this, the environment around him shifted subtly, the opalescent walls dimming slightly as if sensing his turmoil. He realized then that the Queen was not just observing but actively engaging with his thoughts, her presence a gentle nudge guiding him toward comprehension. Yet, despite the shared revelations, a chasm of misunderstanding remained. How could he, a mere human, articulate the complexities of his species to such advanced beings? The task seemed insurmountable, laden with the potential for catastrophic misinterpretation. His mind raced, seeking a strategy, a way to bridge the immense gap between their worlds. The Queen's eyes, those glowing slits, narrowed slightly, and Elias sensed a flicker of impatience. Time, it seemed, was a luxury they did not possess. With a deep breath, Elias steeled himself, knowing that whatever path lay ahead, it would require more than intellect or diplomacy. It would demand a leap of faith, a mutual vulnerability that transcended species and defied the cold logic of survival. As he prepared to step further into the unknown, the Queen extended her hand once more, her crystalline fingers beckoning him forward. This time, there was no hesitation. With resolute determination, Elias grasped her hand, ready to face whatever truths or trials awaited them in the depths of this alien sanctuary. The moment their hands met again, the cathedral-like structure dissolved around them, replaced by an endless expanse of shimmering void. There was no ground beneath their feet, no sky above, only a vast, pulsating field of energy that seemed alive with movement and purpose. Elias felt weightless yet anchored, as though tethered to the Queen by an invisible thread that defied the laws of physics. Her crystalline form glowed brighter now, her presence radiating a warmth that pushed back against the cold uncertainty of the void. Around them, shapes began to coalesce, ghostly silhouettes forming out of the ether, each one distinct yet indistinct, like memories half forgotten. These were the council members, Elias realized with a start. They materialized slowly, their forms shifting between humanoid figures and abstract geometries, their very essence too alien for human comprehension. Some pulsed with colors so vivid they hurt his eyes, others remained cloaked in shadow, their outlines flickering like static on an old television screen. Despite their differences, all carried an air of authority, an unspoken understanding that this gathering held the power to shape destinies. The Queen stepped forward, her voice resonating not just in Elias's mind but throughout the void itself. It wasn't language as he knew it, but rather a cascade of emotions, ideas, and impressions that transcended words. She spoke of humanity's potential, of its capacity for both destruction and creation, painting a picture of a species teetering on the edge of greatness, or ruin. Her tone was measured yet urgent, her conviction unwavering even as some of the council members responded with skepticism. One figure, a towering entity composed entirely of swirling fractals, emitted a low hum that reverberated through the void. Its reply came not as sound but as a sensation, doubt laced with disdain. Humanity, it argued, was reckless, driven by greed and short-sighted ambition. The scars left on Earth, pollution, war, extinction, were proof enough of its inability to wield power responsibly. Why gamble the stability of countless worlds on such flawed beings? Another council member, its form resembling liquid silver flowing endlessly into itself, chimed in with a more measured critique. It acknowledged humanity's ingenuity but questioned whether innovation alone could outweigh the risks. Progress, it suggested, often came at too high a cost. The Queen listened intently, her glowing slits narrowing slightly as she absorbed their arguments. Then, without warning, she turned to Elias, her gaze piercing yet expectant. It was clear what she wanted, for him to speak. But how could he possibly address these beings, whose perspectives spanned millennia and civilizations beyond imagining? His throat tightened as panic threatened to overwhelm him. He glanced at the Queen, searching for guidance, but her expression offered none, only trust. She had brought him here for a reason, and now it was up to him to rise to the occasion. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding like a drumbeat in the silence. He opened his mouth to speak, only to find no sound emerged. The void swallowed his attempt whole, leaving him standing awkwardly before the council. Desperation clawed at him, urging him to try again, but the futility of verbal communication struck him like a physical blow. Words wouldn't work here, not when these beings communicated through emotion, memory, and pure intent. Closing his eyes, Elias took a deep breath and focused inward. He thought of Earth, the blue-green orb spinning quietly in the blackness of space. He thought of its people, flawed and beautiful, capable of both breathtaking cruelty and profound kindness. He thought of art, music, science, and love, the things that made life worth living despite its hardships. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out with his mind, channeling those thoughts, those feelings, into the void. At first, nothing happened. Doubt crept in, whispering that he'd failed, that humanity's fate was sealed. But then, something shifted. A ripple spread through the void, faint at first but growing stronger with each passing second. The council members stirred, their forms flickering as though reacting to an unseen force. The fractal being tilted its head, curiosity replacing disdain. The liquid silver entity paused its endless flow, its surface rippling with intrigue. Even the shrouded figures in shadow leaned closer, their outlines sharpening as if drawn to the signal Elias was broadcasting. Encouraged, Elias poured more of himself into the connection. He shared fragments of his own life, the joy of discovery, the pain of loss, the relentless drive to understand. He wove in glimpses of humanity's history. Ancient cave paintings, towering skyscrapers, spacecraft venturing into the unknown. He showed them moments of triumph and tragedy, of unity and division, of hope rising from despair. And finally, he revealed the truth buried deep within his heart, that humans were learners, stumbling blindly toward enlightenment but determined to keep moving forward. As the transmission reached its crescendo, the void erupted into light. Colors danced wildly, forming patterns that mirrored the complexity of human existence. The council members exchanged glances, or what passed for glances among their kind, and for the first time, Elias sensed hesitation in their collective demeanor. Their earlier certainty wavered, replaced by contemplation. The queen watched silently, her luminous form steady and resolute, her faith in him unwavering. But the deliberations were far from over. One council member, a being resembling a spiral galaxy condensed into humanoid form, spoke up, its voice a symphony of stars colliding. It acknowledged the beauty of humanity's journey but raised a crucial question. Could such a volatile species truly coexist with others without causing harm? Was it wise to invite chaos into a carefully balanced cosmos? Elias froze, the weight of the question pressing down on him. How could he answer that? Humanity's track record offered little reassurance. Yet, as he opened his mind further, another thought surfaced, one born not of defense but of humility. Perhaps the answer lay not in perfection but in effort. Humans might never achieve flawless harmony, but their willingness to strive for it, to learn and grow, was evidence of their potential. Before he could articulate this realization, the void shifted once more. The council members began to fade, their forms dissolving into streams of light that spiraled upward and vanished. Only the queen remained, her radiant body casting soft illumination across the empty expanse. She approached Elias, her movements deliberate and unhurried. When she stopped before him, her glowing slits widened, and a wave of emotion washed over him, pride tempered by caution. Then, with a single gesture, she indicated that it was time to leave. The void dissolved around them, replaced by the familiar sight of the alien world's glowing landscape. The crew, who had been waiting anxiously outside the archway, rushed toward him, bombarding him with questions. But Elias barely heard them. His mind was still reeling from what had transpired, the enormity of what he'd witnessed sinking in like the first rays of dawn breaking over a dark horizon. As the group prepared to return to the shuttle, the queen lingered nearby, her presence commanding yet somehow softer now. She extended her hand one final time, and Elias hesitated only briefly before taking it. This touch was different, gentler, almost tender, and as their connection deepened, he felt a surge of gratitude and resolve flow between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, not as conquerors or supplicants, but as partners navigating the uncertain waters of interstellar diplomacy. With heavy hearts and minds alight with possibility, the crew boarded the shuttle, leaving behind the enigmatic queen and the mysteries of her world. As the vessel ascended into the heavens, Elias gazed out the window, watching the planet shrink into a distant speck. Though the encounter had ended, he understood that the journey was far from over. Somewhere out there, amid the stars, decisions were being made. Choices that would determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of countless civilizations scattered across the cosmos. The shuttle's ascent was quiet, the hum of its engines a stark contrast to the chaos Elias had just experienced. Each crew member sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mix of awe, confusion, and lingering fear. Yet none could match the weight pressing on Elias's shoulders. He stared out the viewport, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars, replaying every moment of the encounter. The Queen's final touch lingered like an ember in his chest, warm but tinged with urgency. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As they docked with Aurora's reach, the ship's interior felt foreign somehow, too sterile and confined after what they'd witnessed below. The corridors seemed narrower, the air heavier, as though the vessel itself resisted carrying them back into the mundane reality of human existence. Back in the briefing room, the team convened around the table, their eyes darting between one another as if searching for answers no one possessed. The envoy cleared his throat, breaking the oppressive silence. What did you see down there?" he asked hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced himself to speak. "It wasn't just about us," he began, choosing his words carefully. "They're deciding whether we deserve a seat at the table, or if we're too dangerous to be allowed near it." His explanation unfolded haltingly, piecing together fragments of impressions and emotions rather than concrete facts. He described the council, their skepticism, and the Queen's unwavering defense of humanity. When he recounted his attempt to communicate, not through words but through raw emotion, the room fell utterly still. For a fleeting moment, he saw understanding flicker across their faces, followed quickly by doubt. "And now?" someone finally asked, their tone heavy with dread. Elias shook his head. "We wait." But not passively. He stood, pacing the length of the room as adrenaline coursed through him. "If we want to prove ourselves, to show them that we're worthy, we need to act. We can't rely on her alone to shield us." The group erupted into murmurs, some agreeing while others voiced concerns about overstepping boundaries or risking further alienation. Yet deep down, they all knew Elias was right. Humanity couldn't afford to sit idly by, hoping for mercy from beings whose motivations were incomprehensible. They needed to take responsibility for their past mistakes, their present actions, and their future choices. Over the next several days, the crew worked tirelessly, pooling their expertise to craft a message that would resonate beyond language barriers. Scientists analyzed the harmonics of the Queen's transmissions, musicians composed symphonies inspired by Earth's natural rhythms, and artists created visual representations of humanity's most profound achievements and struggles. Every contribution mattered, each piece adding depth to the mosaic they hoped would convey their sincerity. Meanwhile, Elias withdrew into solitude, poring over the memories imprinted upon him during his connection with the Queen. He revisited the council chamber, reliving their deliberations and dissecting their doubts. What could sway them? What argument might tip the scales in humanity's favor? The answer came unexpectedly one night as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. It wasn't about perfection. It was about potential. The council feared humans because they saw chaos, unpredictability, destruction. But perhaps what they failed to recognize was that within that chaos lay endless possibility. With renewed determination, Elias proposed a radical idea. Instead of presenting humanity as flawless or infallible, they should embrace its imperfections. Show the aliens not only Earth's scars but also its resilience. Highlight how humanity had risen time and again from calamity, learning and adapting. Share stories of forgiveness, redemption, and hope, not as abstract concepts but as lived experiences. The plan took shape rapidly, fueled by a shared sense of purpose. Using advanced holographic technology, the team constructed a dynamic presentation designed to immerse any viewer in the essence of human life. Scenes of war gave way to acts of reconciliation, images of polluted rivers transitioned into restoration efforts, moments of despair dissolved into bursts of creativity and unity. At its core was a single theme: growth. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it strived to become better, a work perpetually in progress. When the message was complete, Elias requested permission to deliver it personally. Though the risks were enormous, he argued that his bond with the Queen made him uniquely suited for the task. After much deliberation and heated debate, the captain reluctantly agreed. With nothing more than a small data sphere containing their plea, Elias descended once again to the glowing world below. This time, when he stepped off the shuttle, the landscape felt different. The bioluminescent flora pulsed faintly, almost mournfully, and the air carried a subtle tension. The Queen awaited him at the edge of the crystalline forest, her form shimmering with subdued brilliance. As Elias approached, she extended her hand without hesitation. Their connection reignited instantly, flooding his mind with a torrent of sensations: urgency, resolve, and something akin to hope. Without speaking, she led him to the spires, where the archway glowed brighter than before. Beyond it, the void stretched endlessly, awaiting their arrival. Clutching the data sphere tightly, Elias followed her into the unknown. The council reconvened swiftly, their forms materializing around him like constellations coming alive. This time, however, Elias didn't hesitate. Holding up the sphere, he released its contents into the void. Streams of light exploded outward, weaving together into a tapestry of sound, sight, and emotion. The council watched intently, their expressions unreadable yet undeniably captivated. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time held no meaning here. When the presentation concluded, the void fell silent. Then, slowly, the fractal being stepped forward. Its hum resonated deeply, carrying a question that reverberated through Elias's very soul. Are you certain this is who you are? Or merely who you wish to be? Elias met its gaze unflinchingly. Both, he replied, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. We are flawed, yes, but we dream of greatness. Give us the chance to grow, and we will honor your trust. For a long while, the council remained motionless, their collective energy crackling with indecision. Finally, the liquid silver entity drifted closer, its surface rippling with approval, or perhaps acceptance. One by one, the others followed suit, until even the shadowy figures nodded in reluctant agreement. The Queen turned to Elias then, her glowing slits widening with unmistakable pride. In that instant, he understood. They had won, not victory, but opportunity. A fragile, tenuous chance to prove themselves, to earn their place among the stars. As the void faded and the alien world reappeared around him, Elias felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the Council's decision, but for the journey that had brought him here. Humanity's path forward would be fraught with challenges, but it was theirs to walk. And somewhere out there, amidst the infinite expanse of the cosmos, the Queen watched, her faith in them unwavering. Back aboard Aurora's reach, the crew gathered once more, this time filled with cautious optimism. Through the viewport, they gazed at the swirling nebula that had once seemed so distant and unknowable. Now it felt like home, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, connection was possible. And so, with hearts alight with hope and minds brimming with possibilities, they set course for Earth, ready to share the story of how humanity had taken its first tentative steps toward becoming part of something greater than itself. The road ahead would be long, uncertain, and undoubtedly difficult, but for the first time, they faced it not as wanderers, but as explorers welcomed into the grand tapestry of the universe.